The stars burned cold in the void as the Valthran mining ship descended toward the dead planet. The world had no name in their records, just a designation. Sector 447b. It was a barren rock, airless and forgotten, spinning slowly at the edge of explored space. Commander Tharvex stood on the bridge, his three eyes fixed on the gray surface below. His scales flickered with mild interest, the pattern that indicated boredom among his kind. The mining operation was routine. The Valthran Empire had conquered 70 star systems in the past century alone. They were the dominant force in this region of the galaxy, their technology unmatched, their military unstoppable. Tharvex had commanded fleets that burned worlds and scattered entire civilizations. This dead planet was beneath his attention, but regulations required a command-level officer to oversee the first survey of any new world. The ship touched down with barely a tremor. Dust that had not moved in millennia rose and settled again. The mining crews disembarked in their protective suits, their sensors sweeping across the desolate landscape. Tharvex remained aboard, reviewing reports and counting the hours until he could return to more interesting duties. Then the call came through. One of the survey teams had found something. Tharvex made his way to the surface, his suit's systems compensating for the lack of atmosphere. The team leader, a young engineer named Vexhara, was gesturing excitedly at a structure partially buried in the ancient dust. It was clearly artificial, made of materials that still gleamed despite untold ages of exposure to radiation and micrometeorite impacts. The structure was a vault. The door had corroded away, revealing a chamber within. As Tharvex entered, his helmet lights illuminated rows of storage devices, their surfaces covered in symbols that his translator struggled to interpret. The technology was old, incredibly old, but still functional. Someone had built this place to last, to preserve something important. Vexhara had already connected a portable terminal to one of the storage devices. Data began flowing across the screen, fragments of text and images from a civilization long extinct. Tharvex leaned closer, his interest finally captured. The symbols resolved into words as his translator adapted to the ancient language. The first complete file made him pause. It was a warning. The text described a species that had once inhabited this region of space, a peaceful confederation of traders and explorers. They had been powerful in their time, spreading across multiple star systems, building great cities and vast networks of commerce. Then they had encountered another species, one that changed everything. The warning spoke of a world called Earth, and the creatures that lived there, humans they were called. The ancient text described them in terms that seemed exaggerated, almost hysterical. It claimed that humans were unlike any other species in the known galaxy. They were not the strongest or the fastest. Their technology was not the most advanced, but they possessed something else, something the ancient writers struggled to define. Tharvex scrolled through more files, his skepticism growing. The warnings painted humans as relentless, stubborn beyond reason, capable of adapting to any threat. One passage claimed that humans had evolved on a death world, a planet so hostile that survival itself was an act of defiance. They had fought their way up from primitive beginnings, competing with predators larger and stronger than themselves, enduring ice ages and plagues and catastrophes that would have ended other species. The ancient civilization had made contact with humans during an exploration mission. Initial relations had been friendly, but then a dispute had arisen, something about territorial boundaries and resource rights. The details were vague in the files. What was clear was that the ancient civilization had decided to enforce their claim through military action. That had been their mistake. The files described a war that lasted decades. The humans had been outnumbered and outgunned from the start. The ancient civilization had superior ships, better weapons, larger armies. Victory should have been swift and certain. Instead, the humans had refused to surrender. They had fought with a ferocity that stunned their enemies. When their ships were destroyed, they built new ones. When their cities fell, they retreated and regrouped. When offered generous terms of surrender, they rejected them and fought harder. The ancient writers expressed confusion and frustration. Why would the humans not accept defeat? Why did they continue fighting when the outcome was obvious? The files contained tactical analyses, psychological profiles, desperate attempts to understand an enemy that made no sense by conventional standards. One file stood out to Tharvex. It was a personal log from a military commander, Written near the end of the war. The commander described watching a human ship, badly damaged and leaking atmosphere, ramming itself into a battle cruiser rather than retreating. The crew had died, but they had taken the battle cruiser with them. The commander wrote that this was not an isolated incident. It was how humans fought. They did not calculate odds or measure costs. They simply refused to lose. The war had ended with the ancient civilization retreating. Not defeated exactly, but exhausted, bleeding from 1,000 wounds, unable to sustain the grinding attrition of fighting an enemy that would not stop. They had built this vault as a warning to any future civilization that might encounter humanity. The final entry was brief and direct: never provoke them. Never assume they will surrender. They do not fight like rational beings. They fight like the universe itself owes them victory, and they will tear reality apart before they admit defeat. Tharvex finished reading and stood silent in the ancient vault. Around him, his team was cataloging more files, more warnings, more desperate accounts from a civilization that had learned too late what humans were capable of. He should have been concerned. He should have ordered this information transmitted immediately to Imperial Command. Instead, he felt amused. The Valthran Empire had conquered dozens of species. Some had been technologically advanced. Some had possessed vast fleets and armies. All had fallen before Valthran might. The idea that some primitive species from a backwater world could pose a threat was absurd. These warnings were clearly the paranoid ravings of a weak civilization looking for excuses to explain their failure. Besides, Tharvex thought, these files were thousands of years old. If humans had been such a threat, where were they now? Why hadn't they spread across the galaxy and conquered everything in their path? The most likely explanation was that they had destroyed themselves as violent species often did, or had been wiped out by some other force. He ordered the files copied for the Imperial Archives, then returned to his ship. The vault would be sealed and marked for future study, but Tharvex had no intention of wasting the Empire's time with ancient ghost stories. He had a schedule to keep and a career to advance. Back on the bridge, young Do-hyun, a junior translator who had been reviewing the files, approached Tharvex nervously. Do-hyun was unusual among the Valthran, possessed of a curious mind and a tendency to question authority that his superiors found irritating. "Commander, I finished analyzing the linguistic patterns in those files. The warnings are consistent across multiple sources spanning centuries. This wasn't propaganda or exaggeration. The civilization that wrote these truly believed humans were an existential threat." Tharvex waved a dismissive claw. "Then where are these terrifying humans now? Why do our star charts show no evidence of their empire?" Do-hyun hesitated. Perhaps they are still confined to their home system. Perhaps they haven't developed faster than light travel yet. Or perhaps they are extinct, or perhaps they never existed at all. Tharvex interrupted. "File your report, Do-hyun. Let the scholars debate ancient mysteries. We have real work to do." The ship lifted off, leaving the dead world and its vault of warnings behind. As they jumped to faster-than-light speed, heading back toward the heart of the Empire, none of them knew that Imperial scouts had already discovered a small, blue-green world in an unremarkable star system. A world whose inhabitants had just achieved basic spaceflight. A world whose primitive radio signals had been intercepted and analyzed. A world called Earth. In the Empire's capital, Admiral Koresh was already preparing invasion plans. The planet was rich in resources and occupied a strategic location. The inhabitants were primitive, possessing only chemical rockets and fission weapons. They would be easily conquered, easily enslaved. It would be a simple operation, barely worth the Admiral's attention. The ancient warnings remained unread in the archives. Just another piece of data among billions, gathering digital dust. And humanity went about its business, unaware that its long isolation was about to end, unaware that an empire that had never known defeat was about to learn why the ancients had been so afraid. Minho, still aboard the space station, managed to hack into an alien communications relay that had been left carelessly. 6 months had passed since the Valthran invasion began. Earth's surface was scarred with craters where cities once stood. Nearly 2 billion humans were dead. The aliens controlled orbit and had established occupation zones across every continent. By all logical measures, the war should have been over. Instead, it was getting worse. Commander Tharvex walked through the ruins of what had been Mumbai, his security detail scanning nervously for threats. The occupation should have been simple. Humans were primitives with crude weapons. Yet in the past week alone, 3 Valthran patrols had disappeared in this sector. No bodies recovered, no witnesses, just soldiers who went out and never came back. The explosion rocked the street ahead. Tharvex dropped behind cover as debris rained down. His shields absorbed the blast, but 2 of his guards were not as lucky. They lay in pieces on the broken pavement. The attack had come from nowhere, perfectly timed and placed. Tharvex called for air support, but the response was delayed. Human resistance fighters had started using captured Valthran communications equipment to jam their frequencies and send false orders. The confusion was spreading through the occupation forces like a disease. In a hidden bunker 30 meters below the surface, Somin monitored the attack results on salvaged equipment. She was 24 years old, had been studying medicine before the invasion, and was now one of the most effective guerrilla commanders in Asia. The improvised explosive device had worked perfectly. Assembled from Valthran power cells and human ingenuity, she typed commands into a laptop connected to stolen alien tech. Target neutralized. Team 3, extract now. Team 7, prepare the next position. Her fighters melted away into the ruins before Valthran reinforcements arrived. This was how humans fought now. Hit fast, disappear faster. Make the enemy afraid of every shadow and corner. The Valthran had superior technology, but humans had learned to turn that advantage into a liability. The aliens relied on their sensors and shields. Humans had figured out how to spoof the sensors and exploit gaps in the shields. Somin had lost her entire family in the first week of the invasion. Her parents, her younger brother, her fiancé, all dead in the bombardment of Busan. For the first month, she had hidden and cried and wanted to die. Then she had met other survivors who refused to give up. They taught her how to fight, how to hate with purpose. Now she was teaching others. Across the planet, similar resistance cells operated independently. The Valthran had destroyed most communication infrastructure, but humans adapted. They used old radio systems, courier networks, even trained birds to carry messages. Information spread slowly but surely. Every successful attack, every Valthran weakness discovered was shared and exploited. In orbit, Engineer Minho had become something humans had never expected. A space pirate. Using a salvaged shuttle and a crew of desperate volunteers, he raided Valthran supply ships. The aliens had grown complacent, assuming no human vessel could threaten them. They were wrong. Minho's shuttle drifted in the shadow of a destroyed space station, running silent with all power systems at minimum. His crew of 12 watched their sensors as a Valthran supply transport approached. It was a small ship by alien standards, but it carried weapons, ammunition, and medical supplies the occupation forces needed. Remember, Minho whispered into the comm. We have one shot at this. Anna, you ready with the virus? Hana, a former software engineer now turned cyber warfare specialist, nodded. Her fingers danced across a keyboard. Upload ready. Once we're in range, I need 30 seconds. The transport passed within 200 meters. Hana initiated the transmission. The virus, designed from stolen Valthran code and human creativity, wormed its way into the transport's navigation system. Alarms blared on the alien ship as controls locked and systems failed. Minho fired the shuttle's magnetic grapples, latching onto the transport's hull. His crew moved fast, cutting through the airlock with captured Valthran tools. The 6 alien crew members inside barely had time to reach for weapons before human bullets found them. It was brutal and efficient. Minho felt nothing as he stepped over the alien bodies. They had killed billions of humans without mercy. Turnabout was fair. The shuttle returned to a hidden base on the far side of the moon, cargo hold filled with captured supplies. The resistance was growing stronger, better equipped, more coordinated. The Valthran were learning that occupying Earth was very different from conquering it. Admiral Koresh studied casualty reports with growing concern. Over 5,000 Valthran soldiers dead or missing in 6 months. That number seemed small compared to human losses, but it was unprecedented. In previous conquests, post-invasion casualties had been virtually zero. Defeated species accepted reality and submitted. Humans did not seem to understand the concept of defeat. The Admiral called a strategy session with his senior commanders. Tharvex attended via hologram, still planet-side directing occupation operations. He looked tired, his scales showing stress patterns. The situation is deteriorating, Tharvex reported. Human attacks are increasing in frequency and sophistication. They have learned our patrol routes, our communications protocols, our weapons capabilities. Every week they surprise us with new tactics. Another commander, Velkash, added his own concerns. Supply lines are compromised. 3 transports lost this month. Our forces planetside are running low on critical materials. The humans somehow know which shipments to target. Koresh felt a chill run through him. This was wrong. This should not be happening. The humans had been bombed back to a pre-industrial state in many regions. They should be starving, desperate, broken. Instead, they were adapting and fighting smarter. He thought of the ancient warnings, the files from the dead world. The accounts of a species that refused to surrender, that fought with irrational determination. He had dismissed those warnings as exaggeration. Now they seem prophetic. We need to change strategy, Koresh said. Increase bombardment. Target their agricultural centers, their water supplies. Make survival so difficult they have no choice but to submit. Tharvex hesitated. Admiral, that will kill millions more. Perhaps billions. The Empire generally avoids total extermination. Dead slaves produce nothing. These are not going to be slaves, Koresh snapped. These are enemies who refuse to accept reality. We break them or we leave. Those are the only options. The bombardment intensified. Orbital weapons struck farmland, turning fertile fields into scorched wasteland. Dams were destroyed, flooding valleys and cutting off water to cities. Forests burned. The Valthran were trying to make Earth uninhabitable, to force humanity to choose between surrender and extinction. Humanity chose neither. In a reinforced bunker beneath the former city of Chicago, strategic analyst Junho studied maps and casualty figures. He was 32, had worked for military intelligence before the invasion, and possessed a talent for seeing patterns others missed. The Valthran thought they were unpredictable, but they were not. They followed doctrine, relied on established tactics, made decisions based on logical parameters. Humans, Junho understood, were fundamentally illogical. That was their strength. He marked positions on the digital map. The Valthran are focusing bombardment here, here, and here. Agricultural zones. They are trying to starve us. But look at their fleet positioning. They have pulled ships from the southern hemisphere to support the bombardment. Captain Ji-Wan, watching over his shoulder, saw what he meant. That leaves their command ship vulnerable. For approximately 4 hours every third day when the orbital mechanics align properly, Junho confirmed. If we could get a strike force through their defensive perimeter during that window, we might actually damage something important. It was a desperate plan, with almost no chance of success. Ji-Wan approved it immediately. The strike force consisted of 12 modified missiles, each carrying a human pilot and a nuclear warhead. The missiles were crude, built from salvaged parts in desperation. The pilots were volunteers who knew they were not coming back. They called themselves the Taehyung Squadron, named after the first pilot who had volunteered. Taehyung himself was 26, a former commercial airline pilot who had lost his wife and son in the destruction of Jakarta. He sat in the cramped cockpit of his missile, checking systems one last time. The math said this should not work. The Valthran point defenses would shoot down most of them. Maybe all of them, but maybe one would get through. All units, this is Taehyung. Final check complete. Launch in 60 seconds. The other pilots confirmed readiness. 12 voices, calm and determined, accepting death as the price of striking back. The missiles launched from hidden silos across 3 continents, timing carefully calculated by Junho's analysis. They streaked toward orbit, accelerating hard, primitive guidance systems locked on the Valthran command ship. Alarms blared across the alien fleet. Point defense systems engaged, firing thousands of rounds at the incoming missiles. 9 were destroyed in the first 30 seconds. 2 more died in the second wave of fire. Taehyung watched his squadmates disappear from sensors. His missile shook as near misses peppered its hull. Damage warnings flashed red. His oxygen system was failing. Didn't matter. He only needed another 30 seconds. And protected, he began. The war had entered its second year. Earth was a graveyard planet now, its surface pockmarked with craters and radiation zones. 4 billion humans were dead. The Valthran occupation forces had grown from 300 ships to nearly 1,000, reinforcements pouring in from across the Empire. Yet somehow impossibly humanity was winning, not winning in the traditional sense. Cities still lay in ruins. Starvation was widespread. Disease ran rampant through refugee camps. But the Valthran were bleeding. Every day they lost soldiers, ships, equipment. Their supply lines stretched thin. Their troops grew fearful and exhausted. An occupation that should have cost nothing was draining the Empire's resources at an alarming rate. In the underground bunkers that served as humanity's new command centers, Captain Jiwan coordinated operations across 3 continents. She had aged 10 years in 12 months. Her hair had gone gray at the temples. She rarely slept more than 3 hours at a time. But her eyes still burned with the fire that had kept her fighting since Sol died. A report came in from the European theater. Resistance cells had captured a Valthran supply depot outside the ruins of Berlin. The haul included weapons, ammunition, and something even more valuable, medical supplies compatible with human biology. Dr. Yunji had been working on that problem for months. She was a biochemist who had survived the bombing of her research facility in Daejeon by sheer luck. Now she worked in a converted subway tunnel, studying captured Valthran technology and biology with equipment salvaged from destroyed laboratories. The aliens had assumed humans could not understand their biochemistry. That assumption was proving costly. Yunji examined the captured medical supplies under a makeshift microscope. The Valthran immune system relied on specific proteins that were remarkably vulnerable to modification. She had been working on a theory for weeks, and now she had the materials to test it. She worked for 72 hours straight, synthesizing compounds, running tests, refining the formula. When she finished, she had created something beautiful and terrible, a biological agent that would be harmless to humans but devastating to Valthran physiology. It will spread through their air recycling systems, she explained to Jiwan over a secure channel. Once it reaches critical concentration, it attacks their respiratory system. Death within hours, and it is contagious among them. Jiwan felt a chill. This was a weapon of mass destruction, a plague that could kill millions. The Valthran had murdered billions of humans without hesitation, had bombed cities full of civilians, had shown no mercy. Turnabout would be fair, but using biological weapons meant crossing a line humanity had sworn never to cross. How targeted can we make it? Jiwan asked. Can we use it against military installations without risking civilian populations? Yunji laughed bitterly. What civilian populations? The Valthran brought soldiers and occupiers. There are no alien children here, no innocent families. Every single one of them is complicit. The moral weight pressed down on Jiwan. She had become a soldier to protect people, not to commit genocide. But what choice did they have? The Valthran would not negotiate. They would not leave. It was extinction or victory, with no middle ground. She approved the weapons deployment. Meanwhile, Minho had evolved from space pirate to naval commander. His fleet now numbered 23 captured and retrofitted Valthran vessels, crewed by humans who had learned alien systems through determination and desperation. They operated from hidden bases in the asteroid belt, striking supply convoys and isolated ships. The latest prize was a troop transport, carrying 3,000 Valthran soldiers to reinforce ground operations in South America. Minho's ships had ambushed it near Jupiter, disabling its engines and boarding before it could call for help. The fighting inside the transport was brutal. Close quarters, human weapons against alien armor. But humans had learned to aim for weak points in the Valthran protective gear. They had learned where the aliens' vital organs were located. The knowledge had been bought with blood, but it was knowledge nonetheless. When the battle ended, Minho stood in the transport's command center, surrounded by alien corpses. His crew was checking every compartment, securing prisoners, cataloging equipment. This was how humanity fought now. They took everything the enemy had and used it against them. Among the captured supplies, they found encrypted data cores, technical specifications, fleet movements, communication codes. Minho immediately sent everything to Resistance intelligence units planetside. Every scrap of information was another piece of the puzzle, another vulnerability to exploit. But they also found something else. Orders from the Valthran High Command, stamped with the highest security clearances. Minho read through them with growing dread. The Empire was done trying to conquer Earth. They had authorized the use of planet-killer weapons. In 1 month, a special fleet would arrive carrying devices that could shatter Earth's crust, boil its oceans, and erase all life. The Valthran had decided that if they could not have Earth, no one would. Minho transmitted the information to Jiwon immediately. "We are out of time. They are going to destroy the entire planet." The news spread through human command networks like wildfire. After everything they had endured, all the fighting and sacrifice and determination, the Valthran were simply going to obliterate Earth from existence. It was the final insult, the ultimate proof that the aliens saw humanity as nothing more than an infestation to be eradicated. Strategic analyst Junho studied the intercepted orders, looking for any advantage. The planet killer fleet would arrive in 30 days. They would approach from a specific vector, following standard Valthran doctrine. They would have escorts, but not as many as they should. The Empire was overextended, spread too thin across too many systems. "We have one chance," Junho told Jiwon. "If we can mass our entire remaining military force, every ship, every weapon, every soldier, we might be able to stop them before they reach firing range. It would be humanity's last stand. Everything or nothing. Victory or extinction." Jiwon issued the call to arms. Every resistance cell, every hidden base, every surviving military unit was to converge for a final battle. Human ships began moving toward the rendezvous point, a patch of empty space between Earth and Mars. Minho's captured fleet. Retrofitted civilian vessels with weapons bolted to their hulls. Ancient military ships that had been obsolete before the war started. Anything that could fly and fight. On the ground, resistance forces prepared for a simultaneous offensive against Valthran occupation zones. If humanity was going to die, they would die fighting. Hyejin had become a legend in the ruins of East Asia. The young woman who had survived Seoul's destruction now commanded 5,000 fighters. They operated from the rubble of cities, striking Valthran positions with savage efficiency. She had personally killed 47 alien soldiers. Each death was a payment toward the debt they owed for her grandmother, her city, her world. Now she received orders for the final offensive. All resistance units were to attack simultaneously, drawing Valthran forces away from orbital defense positions, creating chaos and confusion when the planet killer fleet arrived. She gathered her fighters in an underground chamber that had once been a subway station. Most of them were young teenagers and 20-somethings who had lost everything. They carried weapons taken from dead Valthran. They wore scraps of armor over civilian clothes. They looked like they should be in school or working jobs or falling in love, not preparing to die in a hopeless war. "This is it," Hyejin told them. "In 30 days, the aliens will try to destroy Earth. We are going to make sure they cannot. Some of us will die, maybe all of us. But we will make them remember us. We will make them regret ever coming to our world." The fighters cheered, their voices echoing through the ruined station. They were ready. Across the planet, similar scenes played out. Humans preparing for the end, determined to go out fighting. In his private quarters aboard the command ship, Admiral Koresh felt no satisfaction in the upcoming victory. The planet killer authorization had come from the highest levels of imperial government. Earth was to be made an example, a warning to any species that might consider resistance, but at what cost? The Empire had committed nearly a quarter of its military forces to subjugating one primitive world. Thousands of soldiers dead, hundreds of ships lost, resources depleted, and now they were resorting to total extermination because they could not break human will through conventional means. Koresh thought about his long career, the worlds he had conquered, the enemies he had defeated. None of them had been like this. None of them had made him question whether victory was worth the price. Commander Tharvex reported in, his image haggard on the hologram. "Admiral, we have intercepted human communications. They know about the planet killers. They are massing for a counteroffensive." "Let them," Koresh said tiredly. "What can they possibly do against a fleet designed to crack planets?" Tharvex hesitated. "Admiral, I have been reading the ancient warnings. The files from the dead world. They describe exactly this scenario. Humanity pushed to the brink, facing extinction and fighting back with everything they have. The ancient civilization made the same mistake we are making. They thought overwhelming force would break human spirit. Instead, it made humans more dangerous." The Valthran fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. 300 warships, their hulls gleaming with weapons that could crack planets, arranged themselves in perfect formation. Admiral Koresh stood on the bridge of the flagship, satisfaction coloring his scales a deep purple. This would be quick and clean, another easy victory for the Empire. The humans had detected their arrival within minutes. Primitive sensor arrays picked up the massive energy signatures and chaos erupted across Earth. Radio signals filled the void, panicked transmissions in dozens of languages. The humans were afraid. Good. Fear made conquest easier. Captain Jiwan sat in the command center of the Earth Defense Forces headquarters in Geneva, watching the tactical display with growing dread. She had spent 15 years in the military, rising through the ranks to command humanity's orbital defense network, but nothing in her training had prepared her for this moment. The alien ships outnumbered Earth's entire defensive fleet by 10 to 1, and each enemy vessel was larger than anything humanity had ever built. She activated the emergency channel to all military installations worldwide. "This is Captain Jiwan. We have confirmed contact with an extraterrestrial fleet. All defensive positions move to high alert. Someone get me a line to the Security Council immediately." The world leaders assembled in record time, their faces appearing on screens around the command center. They looked terrified. Jiwan understood. Humanity had dreamed of first contact for centuries, imagining peaceful meetings and cultural exchanges. Not this. Not a fleet of warships appearing without warning. The alien transmission arrived 12 hours after their emergence. The Valthran had taken their time, letting fear build, letting the humans understand how powerless they were. When Admiral Koresh's image finally appeared on every screen across Earth, his message was simple and brutal. "Humans of Earth, we are the Valthran Empire. Your world now belongs to us. You will surrender all military forces immediately. You will provide complete access to your resources and infrastructure. Resistance is futile. You have one planetary rotation to comply." The transmission ended. No negotiation. No diplomacy. Just demands backed by overwhelming force. Jiwan stared at the blank screen, anger rising beneath her fear. She had a husband and 2 daughters in Seoul. She had joined the military to protect them, to protect everyone, and now some alien empire thought they could just take everything, as if humanity had no say in its own fate. The Security Council debated for hours. Some argued for immediate surrender. What choice did they have? Others wanted to fight even if the odds were hopeless. The arguing went in circles while the deadline ticked closer. Finally, they agreed to attempt communication, to buy time if nothing else. Jiwan composed the response herself, keeping her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her chest. "This is Captain Jiwan of Earth Defense Forces. We received your message. We request negotiations. We are willing to discuss peaceful coexistence. Please let us talk." The response came within minutes. Admiral Koresh appeared again, his 3 eyes showing what might have been amusement. "There is nothing to discuss. Submit or be destroyed. You have 12 hours remaining." The transmission cut off again. Jiwan slammed her fist on the console. They were not even willing to talk, not even willing to pretend at diplomacy. To the Valthran, humans were nothing, less than nothing, just another resource to be exploited. Across Earth, people watched the sky with fear and anger. In Seoul, Jiwan's family huddled together, trying to stay calm. Her daughters, barely teenagers, asked questions she could not answer. Her husband tried to comfort them while checking emergency supplies and escape routes, as if any of that would matter against a fleet that could destroy cities from orbit. Engineer Minho watched from the International Space Station, his hands gripping the observation window's frame hard enough to hurt. He had been up here for 3 months, conducting research on next-generation propulsion systems. Now he had a front-row seat to humanity's potential extinction. The alien fleet hung in the distance like dark stars, their weapons already tracking every human installation in orbit. Minho had studied the alien ships through the station's telescopes, recording every detail, every weakness he could find. Not that it would matter. The technology gap was insurmountable. The aliens had crossed light years of space in weeks. Humanity's fastest ships could barely reach Mars. It was like comparing a wooden club to a nuclear weapon. But Minho kept studying anyway. Because that was what humans did. They learned. They adapted, even when facing the impossible. The deadline expired. The Security Council had voted against surrender, though the decision was close. They authorized Jiwan to negotiate, to stall, to do anything except give up without a fight. It was probably suicide, but humanity had a stubborn streak that ran deep. Jiwan sent another transmission. We cannot accept your terms. Earth is our home. We are willing to share information, to establish trade, to be allies, but we will not surrender. This time, Admiral Koresh did not bother responding with words. The first strike hit Seoul, a beam of coherent energy, invisible until it struck atmosphere, punched through the sky like the finger of an angry god. It hit the city center with the force of 100 nuclear weapons. Buildings vaporized instantly. The shockwave flattened everything for kilometers. Millions of people died before they even knew what was happening. Jiwan watched the satellite feed in horror. Her city, her family, gone in a flash of light and fury. The command center fell silent as the enormity of it sank in. The aliens had not targeted a military installation. They had destroyed a civilian population center, killed millions of innocent people as a demonstration. The transmission came again. Admiral Koresh looked pleased with himself. That was a warning. You have 6 hours to surrender. For every hour you resist, we will destroy another city. The choice is yours. Jiwan stared at the screen. Her hands were shaking. Her mind felt numb. Everything she had lived for, everything she loved, was ash and radioactive dust. The alien admiral was already selecting the next target, treating human lives like they meant nothing. Something broke inside her. Not her spirit. Her fear. All defense forces, she said, her voice cold and steady now. Prepare for combat operations. Launch everything we have. The order went out across the planet. Military commanders who had been paralyzed by shock and horror suddenly had a purpose. Missile silos opened, fighter craft launched, orbital weapons platforms, outdated and primitive compared to alien technology, powered up their weapons. Submarine-based launchers fired their payloads. Ground-based railguns locked onto targets. It was futile. Everyone knew it was futile. But humanity was done asking for mercy. The counterattack was chaotic and desperate. Nuclear missiles streaked toward the alien fleet, only to be shot down by point defense systems light years more advanced. Railgun projectiles bounced harmlessly off energy shields. Human fighters, brave pilots flying machines that were already obsolete, died by the hundreds as alien weapons carved through them, but humanity kept fighting. Admiral Koresh watched the human resistance with growing irritation. He had expected immediate surrender after Seoul. Instead, these primitives were throwing everything they had at his fleet. It was pointless, suicidal, irrational. Why would they keep fighting when they had no chance of winning? One of his officers reported damage to a destroyer. A human missile had somehow penetrated the shields, exploiting a momentary gap in the defensive field. The damage was minor, easily repaired, but it should not have been possible. The humans should not have been able to adapt that quickly. Koresh ordered another demonstration. The beam struck Tokyo this time. Another ancient city erased in seconds. Another 10 million lives ended. Humanity attacked harder. In the ruins of Seoul, survivors emerged from shelters to find their world transformed into hell. Hyejin, a university student who had been visiting her grandmother outside the city center, stood at the edge of the destruction zone. Her grandmother had not survived. Neither had most of the people she had ever known. She picked up a piece of rubble, holding it in her burned and bleeding hands. The aliens thought they could break humanity with fear and overwhelming force. They thought humans would see the futility and give up. They did not understand that humans had spent their entire existence facing impossible odds. Evolution had forged humanity in a crucible of predators and disasters and struggles that would have destroyed weaker species. Humanity had learned one lesson above all others: never give up. Never surrender. Fight until you cannot fight anymore, and then keep fighting anyway. Hyejin looked up at the sky where the alien fleet waited, confident in their superiority. She whispered a promise to her grandmother's memory and to all the dead of Seoul. We will make you pay. Every single one of you. Captain Jiwan coordinated the defense from her command center, her grief locked away behind cold professionalism. Reports flooded in from around the world. The Velthran were destroying cities, killing billions, trying to force submission. But every attack made humanity fight harder. Volunteers overwhelmed recruitment centers. Factories retooled to produce weapons. Scientists worked around the clock to find any advantage, any weakness. What would you have me do? Koresh demanded. Retreat? Admit defeat to primitives. The planet killer fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel exactly on schedule. 15 massive ships, each carrying weapons designed to tear worlds apart. Their escort numbered 200 warships, more than enough to handle whatever pathetic resistance the humans might offer. The fleet commander reviewed his orders one final time. Approach Earth, deploy the weapons, fire, simple and final. Then, the sensors detected the human fleet, waiting for them. Every ship humanity possessed had gathered in a defensive formation between the planet killers and Earth. 300 vessels of wildly varying designs. Captured Valthran ships flew alongside retrofitted civilian craft. Ancient military destroyers operated in formation with converted mining vessels. It was the most desperate, cobbled-together fleet in galactic history, and it was not retreating. Captain Jiwan stood on the bridge of the flagship, a captured Valthran cruiser that Minho had renamed Indomitable. Every screen showed enemy ships, overwhelming numbers and firepower. The odds of victory were essentially zero. The odds of survival were even worse. She activated the fleet-wide channel. Her voice reached every human ship, every desperate crew member. "This is Captain Jiwan. They came to our world without warning. They murdered billions of our people. They destroyed our cities and our families. Now they come to finish the job, to erase Earth from existence. We cannot let that happen. Today we fight not for victory but for survival. Today we show them what humans are capable of." All ships attack formation. For Earth, the human fleet surged forward. The Valthran fleet commander could not believe what he was seeing. The humans were attacking. Actually attacking. They should have been running, hiding, begging for mercy. Instead, they were charging directly at a force that outgunned them 3-1. It was insane. It was suicide. It was exactly what the ancient warnings had described. The space between the fleets erupted in fire and energy. Missiles streaked through the void. Energy weapons carved through hulls. Ships on both sides died in brilliant explosions that no one would hear in the silence of space. Minho piloted a captured fighter craft, leading a squadron of similarly desperate pilots. They dove through the Valthran formation, targeting the planet killer ships themselves. Point defense systems shot down most of them, but a few got through. Minho fired everything he had at the nearest planet killer, watching his weapons splash harmlessly against its massive shields. Then the biological weapon hit the Valthran fleet. Dr. Yunji's creation had been loaded into missiles and fired at the largest concentration of enemy ships. The containers burst open, releasing clouds of engineered microorganisms into the void. The vacuum should have killed them instantly, but Yunji had modified them to survive in space long enough to reach their targets. The organisms infiltrated Valthran life support systems. Within hours, they had spread through entire ships. Valthran crew members began collapsing, their respiratory systems failing. Medical bays overflowed with dying soldiers. Panic spread faster than the disease itself. The fleet commander received reports of ships going dark, entire crews dead or dying. His own vessel was reporting contamination. He sealed himself in his command suit, but he could hear crew members choking and dying around him. This was not how warfare was supposed to work. This was horror. On Earth's surface, Heejin led her fighters in the simultaneous ground offensive. Thousands of resistance cells struck Valthran occupation forces at the same moment. The aliens, already spread thin and demoralized, found themselves under attack from every direction. Heejin's team hit a command center in what had been Shanghai. They moved through the ruins like ghosts, striking fast and fading away before the aliens could respond. Every Valthran soldier they killed was one less enemy threatening their world. She planted explosives on a communications relay, then retreated to cover. The blast lit up the night, another small victory in a war of inches and blood. In orbit, the space battle had become chaos. Human ships were dying, but so were Valthran vessels. The biological weapon was spreading through the enemy fleet like wildfire. Ships tried to quarantine infected sections, but the organism adapted and spread anyway. Strategic analyst Junho, coordinating from a bunker on Earth, watched the tactical display with fierce satisfaction. Their formation is breaking. They are pulling back to deal with the contamination. Planet killers are exposed. All ships focus on the planet killers, Jiwan ordered. Everything we have. The human fleet converged on the massive weapons platforms. Even dying, even with half their ships destroyed, humanity pressed the attack. Fighter pilots rammed their craft into shield generators. Damaged ships used their last power to fire one more shot. Every human in that battle knew they were probably going to die, and not one of them hesitated. One of the planet killers took critical damage, its shields collapsing under concentrated fire. Human missiles punched through its hull, triggering secondary explosions. The massive ship broke apart, its weapon systems dying before they could fire. Admiral Koresh watched from his command ship, which was falling back with the rest of the Valthran fleet. The biological weapon had not reached his vessel yet, but it was only a matter of time. The battle was going wrong in ways he could not have imagined. Then the message came from Do-hyun. The young translator had finally succeeded in his sabotage. The targeting systems on the remaining planet killers were corrupted beyond repair. Even if they fired, the weapons would miss Earth completely. The mission was already a failure. Koresh stared at the message, understanding flooding through him. One of his own people had betrayed the Empire, had sided with humans over his own species. It seemed impossible, but the evidence was undeniable. "Admiral, what are your orders?" his second-in-command asked. Around them, the fleet was dying. The planet killers were destroyed or disabled. The human fleet, though battered and reduced, was still fighting. For the first time in his career, Admiral Koresh gave an order he never thought he would speak. "All ships, retreat. Get us out of this system." The Valthran fleet turned and ran. They jumped to faster-than-light speeds as quickly as their damaged ships could manage, abandoning the occupation forces on Earth's surface. The biological weapon had killed thousands of them. Human weapons had destroyed dozens of ships, and they had accomplished nothing except proving that the ancient warnings had been absolutely correct. Humanity had won. The victory was not clean or glorious. Half the human fleet was destroyed. Tens of thousands of soldiers and crew were dead. Minho's fighter had been hit in the final attack, and he died making sure his last missile struck true. Countless resistance fighters on the ground, including many of Heejin's team, had been killed in the offensive. But Earth survived. The planet killers were destroyed. The Valthran fleet was gone. Captain Ji-won stood in the ruins of what had been the Bridge of Indomitable. The ship had taken critical damage but was still functional. Around her, the surviving human vessels were regrouping, treating wounded, and beginning the long process of securing the wreckage and ensuring no Valthran forces remained in the system. She allowed herself one moment of grief for Minho, for Taehyung, for all the brave souls who had died to save their species. Then she got back to work. The war might be over, but the recovery would take decades. On the surface, Hyejin emerged from the ruins to see Valthran ships fleeing into the sky. Around her, resistance fighters were cheering, crying, collapsing with exhaustion and relief. They had survived. Against all odds, against all logic, humanity had survived. She thought of her grandmother, of everyone she had lost. "We did it," she whispered to the memory. "We made them pay." The Valthran occupation forces left on Earth surrendered within days. Without support from orbit, cut off from reinforcements and facing a human population that would never stop fighting, they had no choice. They laid down their weapons and begged for mercy. Humanity, despite everything the Valthran had done, chose not to exterminate them. The alien soldiers were taken prisoner, disarmed, and eventually returned to the Empire as part of a negotiated peace. It was a gesture that confused the Valthran. They would not have shown such mercy. But humans were not Valthran. That was the point. Translator Do-hyun arrived on Earth aboard a diplomatic shuttle requesting asylum. He had betrayed his entire species to save humanity, and he knew he could never go home. He carried with him the complete archives of Valthran technology, history, and military doctrine. Everything humanity needed to defend itself in the future. Ji-won met him personally. She looked at the alien who had saved billions of human lives and extended her hand in the human gesture of greeting. Do-hyun awkwardly returned the handshake. "Why?" Ji-won asked. "Why did you help us?" Do-hyun's scales showed patterns of sadness and conviction. "Because what my people did was wrong. Because the ancient warnings were true and we ignored them. Because someone had to stop the cycle of violence. I could not save my people from their own arrogance, but perhaps I could save yours from extinction." He was given sanctuary. In time, he would become an ambassador between species, working to ensure that humanity and the Valthran could coexist peacefully. It was an uncertain future, but it was a future nonetheless. The Valthran Empire faced a crisis unlike any in its history. The defeat at Urt,